Again, Poirot nodded. Hale said, "Well, I proceeded according to routine. There wasn't much difficulty in getting down to the facts. On the preceding day, there had been a set-to between Mrs. Crale and Miss Greer. The latter had pretty insolently described some change in the arrangement of the furniture. When I am living here, Mrs. Crale took her up and said, "What do you mean when you are living here?" Miss Greer replied, "Don't pretend you don't know what I mean, Caroline. You're just like an ostrich that buries its head in the sand. You know perfectly well that Amnias and I care for each other and are going to be married." Mrs. Crale said, "I know nothing of the kind." Miss Greer then said, "Well, you know it now." Whereupon, it seems, Mrs. Crale turned to her husband, who had just come into the room, and said, Is it true, Amyas, that you are going to marry Elsa?" Poirot said with interest, "And what did Mr. Crale say to that?" Apparently he turned on Miss Greer and shouted at her, "What the devil do you mean by blurting that out? Haven't you got the sense to hold your tongue?" Miss Greer said, "I think Caroline ought to recognize the truth." Mrs. Crale said to her husband, "Is it true, Amyas?" He wouldn't look at her, it seems, turned his face away and mumbled something. She said, "Speak out, I've got to know." Whereupon he said, "Oh, it's true enough, but I don't want to discuss it now." Then he flounced out of the room again, and Miss Greer said, "You see," and went on with something about its being no good for Mrs. Crale to adopt a dog in the Manger attitude about it. They must all behave like rational people. She herself hoped that Caroline and Amyas would always remain good friends. "And what did Mrs. Crale say to that?" asked Poirot curiously. "According to the witnesses, she laughed. She said, 'Over my dead body, Elsa.'" She went to the door, and Miss Greer called after her, "What do you mean?" Mrs. Crale looked back and said, "I'll kill Amyas before I give him up to you." Hale paused. "Pretty damning, eh?" "Yes." Poirot seemed thoughtful. "Who overheard this scene?" "Miss Williams was in the room, and Philip Blake. Very awkward for them. Their accounts of the scene agree?" "Near enough. You never get two witnesses to remember a thing exactly alike. You know that as well as I do, and Poirot." Poirot nodded. He said thoughtfully, "Yes, it'll be interesting to see." He stopped with the sentence unfinished. Hale went on, "I instituted a search of the house. In Mrs. Crale's bedroom, I found a bottom drawer tucked away underneath some winter stockings, a small bottle labeled jasmine scent. It was empty. I fingerprinted it. The only prints on it were those of Mrs. Crale. On analysis, it was found to contain faint traces of oil of jasmine and a strong solution of quinine. I cautioned Mrs. Crale Mrs. Creel and showed her the bottle, she replied readily. She had, she said, been in a very unhappy state of mind after listening to Mr. Meredith Blake's description of the drug. She had slipped back to the laboratory, had emptied out a bottle of jasmine scent which was in her bag, and had filled the bottle up with quinine solution. I asked her why she had done this, and she said, I don't want to speak of certain things more than I can help, but I had received a bad shock. My husband was proposing to leave me for another woman. If that was so, I didn't want to live. That is why I took it. Hale paused. Poirot said, after all, it is likely enough. Perhaps, and Poirot, but it doesn't square with what she was overheard to say. And then there was a further scene on the following morning. Mr. Philip Blake overheard a portion of it. Miss Greer overheard a different portion of it. It took place in the library between Mr. and Mrs. Creel. Mr. Blake was in the hall and caught a fragment or two. Miss Greer was sitting outside near the open library window and heard a good deal more. And what did they hear? Mr. Blake heard Mrs. Creel say, You and your woman. I'd like to kill you. Someday I will kill you. No mention of suicide? Exactly. None at all. No words like, if you do this thing, I'll kill myself. Miss Greer's evidence was much the same. According to her, Mr. Creel said, do try and do reasonable about this, Caroline. I'm fond of you and will always wish you well, you and your child, but I'm going to marry Elsa. We've always agreed to leave each other free. Mrs. Creel answered to that. Very well. Don't say I haven't warned you. He said, What do you mean? And she said, I mean that I love you and I'm not going to lose you. I'd rather kill you than let you go to that girl. Poirot made a slight gesture. It occurs to me, he murmured, that Miss Greer was singularly unwise to raise this issue. Mrs. Creel could easily have refused her husband a divorce. We had some evidence bearing on that point, said Hale. Mrs. Creel, it seems, confided partly in Mr. Meredith Blake. He was an old and trusted friend. He was very distressed and managed to get a word with Mr. Creel about it. This, I may say, was on the preceding afternoon. Mr. Blake remonstrated delicately with his friend, said how distressed he would be if the marriage between Mr. and Mrs. Creel was to break up so disastrously. He also stressed the point that Miss Greer was a very young girl and it was a very serious thing to drag a young girl through the divorce court. To this, Mr. Creel replied with a chuckle. Callous sort of brute he must have been. That isn't Elsa's idea at all. She isn't going to appear. We shall fix it up in the usual way. Therefore, Poirot said, even more imprudent of Miss Greer to have broken out the way she did. Superintendent Hale said, "Oh, you know what women are? Have to get at one another's throats. It must have been a difficult situation anyhow. I can't understand Mr. Creel allowing it to happen. According to Mr. Meredith Blake, he wanted to finish his picture. Does that make sense to you?" "Yes, my friend, I think it does." "It doesn't to me. The man was asking for trouble. He was probably seriously annoyed with his young woman for breaking out the way she did." "Oh, he was. Meredith Blake said so. If he had to finish the picture, I don't see why he couldn't have taken some photographs and worked from them. I know a chap does watercolors of places. He does that." Poirot shook his head. "No, I can understand Creel the artist. You must realize, my friend, that at the moment, probably his picture was all that mattered to Creel. However much he wanted to marry the girl, the picture came first. That's why he hoped to get through her visit without its coming to an open issue. The girl, of course, didn't see it that way. With women, love always comes first. Don't I know it?" said Superintendent Hale with feeling. "Men," continued Poirot, "and especially artists, are different." "Art," said the superintendent with scorn. "All this talk about art. I never have understood it, and I never shall. You should have seen that picture Creel was painting, all lopsided. He's made the girl look at though she had a toothache, and the battlements were all cockeyed, unpleasant looking, the whole thing. I couldn't get it out of my mind for a long time afterward. I even dreamed about it, and what's more, it affected my eyesight. I began to see battlements and walls and things all out of drawing." "Yes, and women too." Poirot smiled. He said, "Although you do not know it, you are paying a tribute to the greatness of Amyas Creel's art." "Nonsense! Why can't a painter paint something nice and cheerful to look at? Why go out of your way to look for ugliness?" "Some of us, monsieur, see beauty in curious places. The girl was a good looker, all right," said Hale. "Lots of makeup and next to no clothes on. It isn't decent the way these girls go about, and that was 16 years ago, mind you. Nowadays one wouldn't think anything of it, but then, well, it shocked me. Trousers and one of those sports shirts open at the neck, and not another thing, I should say." "You seem to remember these points very well," murmured Poirot slightly. Superintendent Hale blushed. "I'm not passing on the impression I got," he said austerely. "Quite, quite," said Poirot smoothingly. He went on, "So it would seem that the principal witness against Mrs. Creel were Philip Blake and Elsa Greer?" "Yes, vehement they were, both of them, but the governess was called by the prosecution too, and what she said carried more weight than the other two. She was on Mrs. Creel's side entirely, you see. up in arms for her, but she was an honest woman and gave her evidence truthfully without trying to minimize it in any way. And Meredith Blake, he was very distressed by the whole thing. Poor gentleman, as well he might be, blamed himself for his drug brewing, and the chief constable blamed him for it too. Conan, I understand, was in Schedule 1 of the Poison Act. He was a friend of both parties, and it hit him very hard, besides being the kind of country gentleman who shrinks from notoriety and being in the public eye. Did not Mrs. Crale's young sister give evidence? No, it wasn't necessary. She wasn't there when Mrs. Crale threatened her husband, and there was nothing she could tell us that we couldn't get from someone else equally well. She saw Mrs. Crale go to the refrigerator and get the iced beer out, and of course the defense could have subpoenaed her to say that Mrs. Crale took it straight down without tampering with it in any way. But that point wasn't relevant because we never claimed that the cognac was in the beer bottle. How did she manage to put it in the glass with those two looking on? Well, first of all, they weren't looking on. That is to say, Mr. Crale was painting, looking at his canvas and at the sitter, and Miss Greer was posed, sitting with her back almost to where Mr. Crale was standing and her eyes looking over Mr. Crale's shoulder. Pirate nodded. As I say, neither of the two was looking at Mrs. Crale. She had the stuff in one of those pipe things one used to fill mountain pens with them. We found it crushed to splinters on the path up to the house. You have an answer to everything, Poirot murmured. Well, come now, and Poirot, without prejudice, she threatens to kill him. She takes the stuff from the laboratory. The empty bottle is found in her room, and nobody has handled it but her. She deliberately takes down iced beer to him. A funny thing, always, when you realize that they weren't on speaking terms. A very curious thing, I had already remarked on it. Yes, bit of a giveaway. Why was she so amiable all of a sudden? He complains of the taste of the stuff, and Connie has a nasty taste. She arranges to find the body and sends the other women up to telephone. Why? So that she can wipe the bottle and glass and then press his fingers on it. After that, she can pipe up and say that it was remorse and that he committed suicide, a likely story. It was certainly not very well imagined. No, if you ask me, she wouldn't take the trouble to think. She was so eaten up with hate and jealousy. All she thought of was doing him in. And then, when it's over, when she sees him there dead, well then, I should say, she suddenly come to herself and realizes that what she's done is murder. and that you get hanged for murder. And desperately, she goes bald-headed for the only thing she can think of, which is suicide. Poirot said, "It is very sound what you say there. Yes, her mind might work that way. In a way, it was premeditated crime, and in a way it wasn't," said Superintendent Hale. "I don't believe she really thought it out, just went on with it blindly." Poirot murmured, "I wonder."